Mhm.
Hey there, welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I am a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I'm delighted to have Jacqueline Trombley with me. Jacqueline, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And you can call
I'm
me Jacqui, by the way. So,
Jacqui.
yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I am very excited for our conversation because we're going to be talking all about IFS, which we will get into what it is and what it does and all that.
hmm
Before we do that, take a minute to introduce yourself to the good people.
Mm. So, as she said, I am Jacqui Trombley. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have been working for about 15 years, and I specialize in trauma. But I work on a host of other mental health, challenges and strengths. And I'm a level two IFS therapist. Yeah, and I work with teens and adults. So love them.
And so you have this thing, I'm sure, where people say to you, "Oh, bless your heart, you work with teens." And you're like, "Those are my people."
They're the best. They're so grumpy and like, their BS meters are like, I mean, are just very fine-tuned and and I was a super grumpy teenager, so like it's just my teenage parts just like love it and yeah, no, I love them.
I love it. I love it. I feel the same way when people say, "Oh my God, you work with toddlers." I'm like, "Yes, those are my people." Are you kidding me?
I know. I know. I know. I love it. It's the best. It's great. Oh my
So you mentioned parts already. And so let's tee up this conversation about parts and what we mean by
God.
that. So just like when we say IFS, tell us what that means and like walk us through a little, some of the basics.
Yes. So IFS stands for Internal Family Systems. It is a therapeutic modality that was created by Dick Schwartz. It's been around for a long time, but it has recently gained a lot of popularity. And it really is all about it looks at our system, our internal world as being made up of many different parts. And these parts have different agendas, they have different experiences, they have different roles, all of which are geared at protecting us, even when they maybe don't seem like that's what they're doing. But they are often protecting inner child parts, our little, young ones inside that are carrying burdens. And so, yeah, they all work together. Or sometimes they're adversarial, hence, a feeling of, anxiety and discomfort. So the IFS seeks to unburden our parts, get to know our parts, and really create a sense of balance and internal synergy that, opens up this space for what we call self energy, which is I like to call it our like inner Buddha. It's just that that way we feel when we are calm. They call it the eight C's of IFS: calm, connected, compassionate, creative. Let's see. Oh my God, clarity. I always forget one or two. Uh,
Curious.
curious, thank you. And what is it?
Two
Yeah,
more.
calm. Yeah, two more. I'm forgetting, but you get it. It's just that energy and what really attracted to me to this model is that like we have got access to this energy if we can unburden. So anyway, and if those, to even further kind of relate this to something a lot of people have seen, one of the biggest reasons this modality has become really popular is if you've seen the movie Inside Out.
Uh-huh.
It's very that's sort of a sort of representation of what that can look like and feel like internally.
Yeah, and actually there are so many parts that Inside Out gets right. One of them is we're not trying to abolish, kill, remove, banish parts. So and
Ooh.
and people, I think, and I was one of them actually. I kind of went into some IFS work thinking, I just wish this part would shut up and go away.
You're not alone. You're not
Yeah.
alone.
So talk about, okay, I want to bring this back in. I want to, we've done a very broad thing here, and I want to kind of funnel this um into teens and adults,
hmm
most of whom in the people who are listening to this podcast love someone or are someone who is neurodivergent. So there's that piece of things happening. Okay.
hmm Mm-hmm.
And how does that desire, because all of us have these voices in our heads that are saying things like, you're not good enough to have this job. You're not good enough to parent this kid. This
Mm-hmm.
kid is a problem. Any number of things. This kid is going to live with you until they're 55 years old or
Mm-hmm.
longer. So
Mm-hmm.
walk us through kind of the voices, the players, and how we deal with them. Or
Yes.
we'll get into it a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
I love your question. I love your question. So it is, while we contain multitudes, so we all have many different parts. Everybody always asks me that. How many different parts do I have? And I'm like,
A lot.
it's, a lot, but not all of them are activated or carrying burdens or out of balance. So in therapy, we're really looking at the ones that are need our help, that need some attention. So, but IFS is organized into three, well, I'll say three groups of parts. First group being managers. These managers are, you mentioned some managers actually, you're not good enough. You are, you need to be perfect, or you're doing this all wrong, or, a lot of our critics are managers. So this group of parts, subgroup of parts, is all about making sure that we are accepted by our group, community, the people around us. And they're very strong parts because they're almost evolutionary. We are all the descendants of tribal human beings who realized it's better to be, part of the group than to be left out in the cold without any social capital.
Mhm.
So you need to act in accordance in a way that keeps you part of this group. So they're very outward focused and they're very proactive, which means they like to plan ahead, right? So like I said, we've got people pleaser parts, make sure people like you, right? We've got parts, make sure people don't know that you're struggling, that you're not a good parent. Make sure people know that you're taking care of everything you need to take care of. Make sure your bills are paid. Make sure you're making enough money. Make sure you're doing all these things. And they get pretty severe in their methods, right? So, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna pause you here for a second because a lot of parents get really activated by their children who are struggling and not achieving and
Mm-hmm.
not succeeding in performing to those voices. Whereas
Totally.
parents have been so acclimated to performing to those voices over time,
Mhm.
that creates a lot of dissonance,
Totally.
right? Because
Absolutely.
you're sort of
Absolutely.
used to having this system work, in air quotes, work. It feels
Yeah,
awful.
absolutely.
And then you're having to live with somebody and look at somebody for whom that, number one, for whom that system is not working and you have no idea why. But number two, that's mirroring to you how awful it feels all the
Hmm.
time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the more fear behind it, the more intense the methods get, the parts get, right? And a lot of our these parts are they gather a lot of data from society, from, it's all about comparison, which is the thief of joy, right? You may look at your kid and compare. My kid is not where other kids are. And there's a part that's like that leaves us out, that we're different, we're othered, we're something else. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for my kid? And while they have other beautiful parts that are really regulating this and understand that this is my kid's neurodivergent, or my kid's just, developmentally somewhere else, and whatever, all these things, like that's a different set of parts. And that's why I love this work, is because it rectifies that. Like, how can I know why my kid finds these parts challenging and also be completely triggered by this situation? You know what I mean? So it's like, and how else? They're two different parts. They're two different parts. So absolutely, absolutely. And please interrupt me, because when we start talking about IFS, I can go on and on. So just raise up your hand and
I
say,
love
Jacqi,
it. No,
enough.
but I love this. No, I'm going to repeat what you're saying just in case people need to hear it again, which is this makes perfect sense that you
Mhm.
both understand why your child is doing what they're doing and that you are totally triggered by it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
actually is the thing that makes the most sense.
Yep.
And
Couldn't agree
so,
more.
so then what we need to talk about that is like, well, what the hell do we do about it? Because what
Mm-hmm.
we like to do as humans, and I'm always in the business of telling people, like, I wish we could control other people. My life in particular is the one I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested in, would be a
Yeah.
lot easier if I could.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were queen of the world, oh, that sounds
if
nice.
if I ran the world, right?
Yeah.
And we don't.
No.
So then, right? So we have all these parts that like understand why other people are peopling and why my child is childing and doing all those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we have this other set of parts that is like, this cannot be correct.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
turns out, and I want you to talk about this, it's those set of parts we need to engage with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The exactly. Those are the parts that need our attention. And the truth is they are doing something protective. And you said something earlier, and Dick Schwartz has a great book called No Bad Parts. And that's a very that is the poster of IFS is that we don't want our parts can't go away. You know what I mean? They can't be banished. And they have great skills and great care for us. And it can be a journey of self-love to understand the way they're protecting you rather than come in and tell them to get out. And I always use this example. You know, I like to use this on my therapists because they're the funniest with this. My other social workers that I work with is, you know, it would be like if some little intern came in and sat at your desk and you were about to go on long-term leave and said, "Don't worry, I got it. Go ahead." And you'd be like, "The you don't got it. You don't know what I do around here. So no, I'm not leaving." And that's how these protective parts feel. We want them to stop. We want them to stop getting angry. We want them to stop embarrassing us. We want them to start harming others. And they're like, "No, you have no idea the way in which I'm protecting you." And so the work looks like we need to first understand what they are doing, and we need to get in relationship with those parts. And then maybe we can start a conversation built on mutual trust and love and compassion and, you know, connectedness and all of that. And they might be willing to negotiate a different way of doing things, but not before then.
Not before then. And
Not before then.
if you're listening to this being like, well, first of all, that sounds like a lot of work. Second of all, that sounds pretty hokey. I have this to offer because as somebody who has done this work and who went in being like, well, just get this voice out of my head. Just like take care of this for me to the therapist. I'm telling you this, right?
Yep.
is it can, first of all, one has to give oneself over to the process. This is a visualization exercise. This is a conversation with a part of like an internal part of yourself that doesn't exist in the physical, right? So,
Right,
so
right.
that can feel a little jarring. And I imagine you're a very talented therapist, and a very talented therapist makes that easier,
Mm,
right? Where
that's
where
the
we're
hope.
just what's that?
That's the hope.
Right? Where we're just kind of turning the analyzer down a little bit and stepping
Hmm.
into this metaphorical landscape in which there are many different beings living inside me. They're all me. They're all just
Hmm.
part aspects of me, and we're engaging and taking them out one by one. I will tell you, there were times in my IFS sessions when
Hmm.
the part would answer, and I would be there. So I was in the session, right, as me, and the therapist would say, would you please ask this part if it's all right if they step aside for a second because we've got to deal with something that's behind that.
Mm.
And there were times when that part was like, absolutely not.
Hmm. Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about protectors and exiles?
Absolutely, absolutely. And man, you know, you girl, you really did your work. You know, you speak about that's exactly how it goes. So, you know, I mentioned managers before. That's one of the three parts. Another of the three parts are called exiles. And these are essentially our inner child parts carrying burdens. And you know, I'll tell you for trauma work, this was completely transformative for my work, finding this modality because, and like you said, there's still parts of me that sit on my shoulder, like, is any of this real? Like, this is hokey as hell. But like, until you've experienced it and like heard your system answer back, I've had so many people do this thing, like, that come from. So like did that, um, but the reason I mention exiles and trauma is because we can go through traumatic experiences as kids and they can be big T or little t, right? It can be hugely traumatic childhoods or moments in time where our little inner child selves, our little child selves did not know how to process that moment, right? And so we bottled it up, we put that kid in a bedroom, shut the door, and we walked away because what else can a child do but in order to function besides step over that and keep it moving.
Mhm.
And so that can happen again, hugely traumatic childhoods or, I clients that where something really small happens, like and a relative gets sick, a car accident, a moment where they felt embarrassed at school and nobody knew how to nobody helped them process that.
And
So
listen,
they, yes,
I'm just going to poke in
do
here
it.
for just a second
Please,
because
poking on a lot.
if you are neurodivergent, this is happening to you all over the place every day, possibly for segments of time. I mean, in some ways, we could talk about neurodivergence as being its own adverse childhood experience.
Mm,
In the little insults, sometimes big, that
absolutely.
happen because you are being misperceived by people around you and you are
Totally.
misperceiving what's happening around you, which again, everything is about perception, right?
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
if I trip on the sidewalk and that is traumatic to me, guess what? That's trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter what I mean, and I don't know who said this, Oprah, somebody, right? In that "What Happened to You" book, right?
Yeah,
It's
love
not
that.
about what happens to us. It's how we feel about what happens to us
Totally. It's
that
the
causes
meanings we
trauma,
attach.
right?
Absolutely. And that's why, when I talk about a lot of the work involves going back into that moment and helping, acknowledging, validating, witnessing is a big step in IFS. Because let me tell you what, the biggest thing that I see that creates real that makes the trauma settle in and buy a house right there is is this sentence, and nobody said anything to me about it. And that's not always because we have parents that aren't they paying attention or whatever. The child sometimes doesn't tell the parent, you know what I mean, that nobody knows they had this experience. But the point is they're in that room, they're holding this football filled with emotion, right? This person didn't understand me or like, why did this happen or whatever meaning they're attaching to it. And the big difference that is made is someone coming in, a trusted, safe, calm adult, somebody coming in and saying, "Hey, I see you. I see what you're going through, and I'm sorry that happened." And this happened because, people are mean sometimes, they've got their stuff, but I'm here with you and you're going to be okay.
And what's
And
so interesting about this work is
mhm,
that can happen. And we can argue whether it's best that it happen right after the traumatic event, right? The big
yeah.
event, whatever. And everything's a both and I'm coming
Hmm.
to learn,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
We can do what is, I'm starting to think of as a form of timeline correction when we go into that memory as the witness, right? With backup in the form of the
Yep.
therapist who's not going to
Right.
lose their shit, lose their stuff. Try
Right.
not to swear on the podcast too much.
Yeah, I got
Um,
you.
when we go with a trusted advisor and friend in our self energy, again, self is that all those qualities and goodness, and we
Hmm.
witness ourselves
Mm.
like that is, and again, speaking from experience, those are the transformative moments because that's when I realized, oh, she just wants to play. I'm going to cry. Jesus. Okay.
Oh,
Right. She just wants me to watch her play. That's
yeah,
it. That's all. So then we sit there and we watch her play, and she's very happy, she being whatever child, 5-year old that I'm watching. And then
yeah.
she gets calmed down. This is what we do with actual children. And in IFS, we have the opportunity to do that with our past child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We can go back in and reparent, and again, it's not always a comment sometimes, but it's not always a comment on, my parents didn't, oftentimes the child doesn't say anything. They don't know how to voice what's going on. And being able to do that, I will tell you, has made me a better parent because when I have experienced what I needed, my inner child needed, it's like a two-way street. My kids teach me, you know what I mean, how to do this work, and then I learn how to reinforce that with them. But it's like, oh, this is all you need. And that's why when I have my parents that I'm working with, I use their parent parts. I do. I use a little, it's a little manipulative, but I'm like, what would you say? Because sometimes you get in there and they don't have a lot of critical mass my inner child, my exile. And I'm like, what would you say to your 6-year-old if they were having a tough day at school and they came in and they didn't know what to do? And they're like, oh, well, what do you mean? I'd sit her down, I'd talk to her, I'd tell her she's okay, I'd tell her mommy's here for her, all this stuff, boom, they've got it. And I'm like, so your mom part was held all this wisdom, and so we can apply that, to unburdening these exiles. And to your point, the result ends up being that inner child feels free to invite in things like play, creativity, whimsy, all of that stuff, all that beautiful kid stuff. So, yeah, absolutely.
Which, if you are a parent, like you already know, you're having to pull that stuff out of the air on the regular because that is who children are. And
Hmm.
in at their best, and at our best, we're making that happen, and it's a joyful process. But like, listen, if you're like gonna, go do something not very productive because your kid asked you to play Legos with them again, and you're like, I just cannot. This is the work. This is part of the tool belt, the toolbox that helps us be in acceptance, at least, if not in joy, when our child invites us to play, even if we don't like what
Absolutely.
they're doing.
Absolutely. And delight in that and practice self-forgiveness and grace if you're not in that space to do that.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of parents again, and look, this all sounds great. And that therapist lady with her fancy skills and her kids, she must be no, like these kids take you to the edge of reason, okay? Like, and so like there are some days where your inner child's activated and you may not be able to show up in the way that you always want. And to be able to first attend to that, is a big deal. Like, oh wait, like the reason I can't get there with my kid right now is like there's an exile here that needs attending to. You know what I mean? And just sort of again opening up for that self-love and grace and acknowledgement, can help. But, sometimes there's a perfect storm too.
Yeah. Yes. And then
It
that's
can't
right.
just can't get there some days. That's it.
We forgive ourselves and we move through.
That's
Um,
it.
Exiles,
Mm-hmm.
managers,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and the third.
Oh, I love these. Okay. Firefighters,
Yeah.
my people. So, firefighters, while managers are proactive, firefighters are reactive. So, their job, they're named firefighters because of their quick response. So, think of it as our exile is triggered, has an emotion, has a discomfort, anything. So the different protectors protect differently. So a manager looks at an inner child who's feeling injured and is like, okay, so you were left out of that group today. So we need to be more perfect. We need to look better. We need to be skinnier, like smarter. We need to, but here's what we're going to do so we don't ever have to feel this again. Right? Firefighters, they look at that inner child that's on the ground crying, whatever, and they're like, you know what? Let's blow some stuff up because this is untenable. So we're gonna go ahead and destroy everything. And we're gonna get mad, we're gonna get angry, we're gonna blame, or we are going to numb. You know what I mean? That numb and soothe in some way. So, again, any drinking wine and watching Netflix, eating a bunch of chocolate. I mean, again, it could be big, it could be small, but they come in and they soothe us. And they're trying to help us, but they are often the most maligned parts in our system, right? Managers don't like this. You act mad out in public, you're about to get what? People are going to think we're crazy. You know what I mean? And so they often are fighting, and we call that, oftentimes parts are polarized, which means they are appear to be at opposite ends.
Mhm.
But I have come to really, firefighters are angry parts. I have come to respect and love them because they are our true advocates. They have a lot of wisdom. People don't think so, but usually you're mad because you're not being treated right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's something that there are canary in the coal mine that tells us something ain't right here.
Yeah.
And you're not getting what you need, or like, you know what I mean? And so they really there are advocates. So, but again, they get a lot of flack. They get a lot of flack.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because if we're talking about kiddos too, like that firefighter gets activated pretty often, right? Kids
Hmm.
get into that fighter in that fight mode, right, which is
Yeah,
a sympathetic nervous system state, and then that gets fossilized, I guess, over time, right, and comes up then automatically. But like
right.
that kind of outward push to protect oneself is one that arises very early.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like my son comes home, he's tired, he's hungry, something didn't go well with one of his friends. All right. Is he going to come up to me and say, Mommy, I had a really tough day? Like, no. Okay. He's going to come in and he's going to mess with his sister and he's going to fall out. He's going to throw something, try to break something. I don't know. Like, and it's, it's hard because you want to, right? You see in that part and you're like, ugh, just stop or go away. But that part is he's got an internal energy that he's having trouble metabolizing, and that part is trying to protect and help him with that, you
Okay,
know?
so walk us through this. This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Mm.
Hopefully for the audience too, but side benefit perhaps.
Wait, let me entertain myself
Right,
here.
exactly.
Hopefully other people like it.
Okay. Your son comes home, is
Hmm.
acting this way, very externalized, very kind of out there, reactive.
Hmm.
That's now pinging your firefighter,
Ooh, the way it
right?
is.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because your exile, who stands right behind there,
Hmm.
is like,
Hmm.
this is unacceptable. Nobody's going to come and save you. This is dangerous because we're going to get kicked out. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Tell me how
Hmm.
this works. Tell me how this
Yeah,
works
I
between
love
parent
that.
and child and parts in the parent.
Totally. So my son's firefighter's activated. I feel an inner child. I have an inner child part that really does not like loud noises, chaos, all of that. I don't like that. That is very disruptive to my central nervous system. When I'm not expecting it, you know what I mean? It's one thing when you're like at a concert or something, but in your in your safe home where that is not supposed to happen,
Mm.
that's very disruptive. So, I've got my firefighter might, right, respond with anger towards my son, right? It might, depending on the space that I'm in, depending on how much self energy I have that day, might get mad at him for causing me this discomfort. And then where are we, right? Because then we're at an impasse. He doesn't know how to regulate, right? So what parts work can do, I always want to be validating in the best of times, right? Because man, being a parent is filled with a million little moments and you don't always nail them, right? That's just gotta get with that. But instead, it gives you space, and I can see that's his part, and I can see that my part is getting upset. But really, instead of dealing with those protectors, I can look at both of our exiles behind that. And first, I've learned I need to address my own first. So that can look very different. I can go in the bathroom, I can take a break, I can tap in a resource, my husband or something like that. But, I will look at my exile and say, okay, I see you. I know that was a lot of noise, and I know we don't like noise so much. So let's take some deep breaths and let's just sit quietly for a minute and just try to connect so that we can go out there and we can help us both regulate, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how, theoretically and most of the time if you're able to do that work can look.
And if you're listening and you're thinking, well, that's just a sensory thing that she's describing.
Mm,
Yes. Okay. We are dealing in the realm of nervous systems.
Mm-hmm.
What IFS and what I love about it is it just layers this very elegant um, visual slash kind of world on top of a nervous system that
Mm-hmm.
describes what happens in a way that's really easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it be something that frames it as something you can do something about, which again, I love the nervous system. Like it's very important, but you're a little bit at an impasse if all you have is my ears don't like loud sounds,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's
Mm-hmm.
actually,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of stuck
Totally.
versus, okay, this part of myself that doesn't like loud sounds is very disturbed here. And
Mm-hmm.
I can calm this side down. There's a level of agency when we look through an IFS lens that I think is maybe less present, and maybe not. Somebody is going to call me out on it, and that's fine. But maybe not present when we're just saying it's my nervous system.
Absolutely. And because sometimes the need is something sensory, sometimes the need is something else. You know
Mm.
what I mean? It's acknowledgement. Each part needs something different in different moments. And that's all well and good, but what if you've got a manager, a critic who's sitting there like, he's a child. Don't you know he's a child? Why can't you just calm down? So where are you moving with that? That's sitting right here at the gate, and you can't even go to step two because step one is you shouldn't be feeling this anyway.
Oh,
So that gives a layer of complex, you can give again, sensory stuff's great, but if you're handed that, like you said, you put it so well, like in that, and that'll work sometimes, but other times, what if there's other parts present? So we have to unblend from those parts and see what each part needs, because it might be different.
oh my gosh. Okay, Jacqui, you and I could go all day. And
I literally, literally
I
stop
think
me.
we're going to have you back because we got to do this again because this time flew by for me.
Oh,
And
yeah,
we're
you're
going to,
right.
right? I know.
I know.
We're going to pin it here. If
Okay.
people want to learn more about you and the work that you do, what should they do?
Yes. So I'm on a couple of different platforms. I am working right now at a great practice called Sterben Counseling LLC that specializes in neurodiversity affirming care. So that's a great, she's Karen Sterben does incredible work, and I'm learning so much from her. I also do things outside of that as well. I give trainings and I supervise other therapists, and so I have sort of contact information outside of that as well. But
Perfect.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
will find all of that in the show notes.
Hmm.
And Jacqui Trombley, until next time, thank you.
Yes. Thank you for having me. Thank you.